I'm especially pleased to do so, as supporting charities is at the heart of what I and the whole royal family do. That said, as most of you will appreciate, no one, not even me, says no to William Shawcross.
How can anyone prepare the world for news that alters everything? That answer arrived this morning when the palace doors opened and a figure stepped forward with trembling hands, holding papers that threatened to shake the very foundation of the British crown. This was never meant to happen, certainly not today, and certainly not in this way. The official statement lasted no longer than 3 minutes, but those words will echo through history. Our nation and the wider family of realms whose talents, traditions, and achievements I am so inexpressively proud of. Yet behind closed curtains, family members sat frozen in disbelief, knowing decades of careful planning had just collapsed. Some insisted this outcome was inevitable. Others whispered of betrayal, but all grasped one truth: the monarchy would never again be the same. What had triggered this earth-shattering announcement? Which family member had finally broken their silence? Why were palace insiders warning that this was only the beginning? The answers promised to leave the world stunned. What occurred just 5 minutes earlier had already torn apart agreements forged over years. Unearthed secrets, long buried, and set into motion events that no one could stop. An unexpected revelation had changed everything. The morning had begun. Like countless others at Buckingham Palace, its rhythms steeped in tradition and order. Staff carried out duties with practiced precision. The royal kitchens prepared breakfast trays. Couriers delivered sealed envelopes through the hallways. Security guards stood firmly at their posts, their presence steady, unshaken. The palace, as always, promised stability, a sanctuary of permanence. Yet beneath the calm surface, a storm was gathering. The first signal struck suddenly, like a jolt of electricity racing through the palace walls. An urgent call, sharp and unexpected, sliced through the morning calm. What began as routine communication set off a chain reaction no one could have predicted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Pens froze above pages. Footsteps slowed into silence. Then phones began to ring one after another, their shrill tones echoing through corridors. Within minutes, the palace's ordered life dissolved into tense uncertainty. Something monumental was about to unfold when the press secretary finally emerged. Her face conveyed what words had not yet revealed. Normally the picture of composure, she appeared pale, her eyes betraying the crushing weight of the news she carried. Papers clutched tightly in trembling hands. She stepped to the podium. For one suffocating moment, silence pressed down on the assembled crowd. Then her voice, unsteady and cracking at the edges, began to deliver words crafted in secrecy so guarded that even members of the family had been left in the dark. The statement was short, no more than 3 minutes, but each syllable fell like thunder. Every word had been chosen carefully to balance truth with dignity, yet no phrasing could blunt the impact. This was no ceremonial update, no routine communication meant to reassure the public. This was a revelation strong enough to alter the very structure of the monarchy itself. Inside the palace, the shock ran deeper still. Many members of the royal family were hearing the announcement at the same time as the public. A few had caught whispers of what was to come, but most had no sense of its magnitude. Others, entirely unprepared, learned the truth alongside millions watching across the globe. The revelation did not merely surprise, it divided, unsettled, and stirred unrest. Centuries of order collided with a decision that shattered long-standing tradition. Even the timing spoke volumes. Statement followed weeks of unexplained absences, banquets canceled, ceremonies withdrawn, meetings with foreign leaders quietly postponed. At the time, those cancellations had raised uneasy questions. Now, every missing event made sense. The hidden puzzle suddenly aligned. Staff inside the palace described the atmosphere as charged, almost electric with nervous energy. Footmen whispered in hushed voices. Senior aides exchanged glances, laden with unspoken meaning. Even seasoned courtiers struggled to hide their unease. Something irreversible had been unleashed. Beyond the gates, the world responded with equal urgency. International media scrambled to update headlines. News anchors cut into regular programming with breathless analysis. Social media exploded with speculation, hashtags multiplying by the second. Government offices and royal embassies across Europe and the Commonwealth found their phones ringing without pause as leaders sought clarity. Yet within the palace, the most chilling response was silence and unyielding, suffocating silence more powerful than any official word. The statement had confirmed what many feared, but no one had dared to admit. Serious health concerns had long shadowed the monarch. The king's reduced presence, once dismissed as fatigue or careful pacing, was cast in a grim and somber light. Queen Camilla's quiet absences, once explained away with polite excuses, suddenly carried new meaning. Yet, it was not the medical disclosure that shocked most. What stunned the nation was what followed. The announcement extended far beyond illness. It outlined a radical restructuring of royal duties that shattered centuries of precedent. Power, once safeguarded in the hands of a reigning monarch, was being redistributed not gradually, not ceremonially, but with sudden, decisive clarity. The words on the page did not merely hint, they declared outright that this was no temporary delegation during recovery. It was a transition of control written in the language of permanence. At the center of it all stood Prince William and Catherine. The statement made clear that their roles would extend far beyond supportive duty, placing them in positions of leadership that rivaled the sovereign himself. I think royal duty is extremely important. I think it's part of the fabric of what the royal family and any future monarch has, something that is very important, and I take duty very seriously. These words framed the moment. This was not simply about stepping in while the king rested. It was the deliberate passing of responsibility to the next generation. The crown was being prepared to change hands, not through abdication or mourning, but through a quiet revolution hidden in carefully chosen words. Inside the family, reactions were divided. Some insiders whispered, accepted the urgency of the move, recognizing the need to protect both the monarchy and the nation. Others felt blindsided, cut out of decisions that reshaped their futures. Heated arguments erupted in the days leading up to the announcement, voices raised, loyalties tested. The speed of the decision, coupled with its secrecy, left wounds that would not heal quickly. One moment captured the emotional weight more vividly than any press release. Princess Anne, the very embodiment of duty and resilience, was seen leaving the palace earlier than usual. Her expression, normally stern but steady, carried something different that day, a mixture of concern, resignation, and sorrow. Witnesses described a face heavy with the burden of change, a look that spoke louder than any public statement ever could. For those who admired her lifelong dedication, the sight was heartbreaking. Anne was troubled, then the magnitude of what had happened was undeniable. The echoes of that morning spread far beyond the palace gates. Questions mounted quickly. What would this mean for the monarchy's stability? How would the public respond to such an untraditional handover of power? Would the Commonwealth accept William and Catherine's leadership without the ceremonial transition of coronation? And perhaps most pressing of all, what else had been kept hidden? In just a few minutes, centuries of tradition were shaken. A crown that symbolized endurance and continuity suddenly seemed fragile, caught between past and future. The revelation did not simply inform the world of a king's illness. King Charles III himself had recently shared a rare health update amid his cancer battle. Over a year after announcing an undisclosed cancer diagnosis in February 2024, he told a royal admirer during a visit to the Jockey Club rooms in Newmarket that he was in a good place. Yet this latest development forced a reckoning with what it truly meant to lead, to rule, and to endure in an age when secrecy could no longer last. The world would remember that morning not as routine palace business, but as the moment everything changed, when silence spoke louder than speeches, when paper bore the weight of centuries, and when the monarchy itself stood on the edge of transformation. The announcement was over, but its consequences had only just begun. Behind the official words, hidden battle lines had already formed. What the public saw was carefully crafted, but inside Buckingham Palace, months of silent struggles and mounting tension had taken root. Staff had noticed subtle yet telling changes. Meetings once inclusive now shut out certain members. Direct messages replaced by filtered intermediaries. These were not minor adjustments. They were signs of deep fractures behind closed doors. At the heart of the struggle lay a fundamental question: in which direction should the monarchy move? One side clung firmly to tradition, convinced that the centuries-old structure was the monarchy's strength. The other insisted that the world had changed, that people's expectations had evolved, and that modernization was no longer optional, but necessary. This was not just a policy debate. It was a clash over the very soul of the monarchy and its place in the modern age. Princess Anne's voice in this conflict carried unusual weight. Known for blunt honesty and unwavering duty, she did not hide her concerns. Though far removed from the throne, she could easily claim the crown as the hardest-working and most low-key royal in the family. To her, such sweeping decisions without full consultation were reckless. Her decades of service gave her words gravitas, and her opposition could not be ignored. When Anne spoke against the changes, it was more than personal disapproval. It was a warning bell for the entire institution. The situation grew even more complicated as Queen Camilla's health struggles forced her to withdraw from public life. For the public, her absence inspired sympathy. But within the palace, it widened divisions. Some viewed her retreat as an opportunity to speed up reform, while others saw it as a failure of duty. Instead of unity, the vacuum deepened the cracks. Prince William found himself caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to tradition and the demands of modernization. His leadership style, careful and deliberate, had long favored measured steps over sweeping gestures, yet even his cautious approach stirred ripples across the palace. To some, he embodied hope for a monarchy that could balance both worlds. To others, his reluctance to take bold, decisive action made him seem weak. Amid all this shifting ground, Catherine's role grew ever more central. Catherine's public appearances were no longer the simple ceremonies they once were. They had transformed into deliberate acts of strategy, where every smile, speech, and chosen charity carried symbolic weight. She was no longer seen as just a dutiful princess. She was emerging as a living emblem of a monarchy seeking renewal. The breaking point came during a private family meeting. When years of suppressed frustrations finally boiled over, what began as a discussion quickly escalated into shouting matches. The long-honored royal tradition of polite disagreement collapsed, replaced by raw emotion. For the first time, truths that had been buried for years were spoken aloud, despite his declining health. King Charles attempted to mediate, clinging to his instinct for compromise solutions that gave something to everyone without fully committing to any side, but his efforts pleased no one. To some, his balance appeared weak. To others, indecisive. The family wanted strength, clarity, and direction. Instead, they were left with hesitation. Weeks of failed negotiations made one fact undeniable. Secrecy could no longer contain the situation. The public would have to be told the truth. It was not an easy decision, but many feared that silence would only fuel rumors and speculation. Drafting the official statement began, yet even in those final hours, fierce disagreements raged. Every word was contested. Should the message highlight continuity or emphasize change? Phone lines buzzed. With last-minute arguments, legal advisors weighed the consequences of every phrase. But by then, the momentum was unstoppable. The statement eventually delivered to the world was more than a brief three-minute address. It was the product of months of hidden quarrels, midnight meetings, and irreconcilable disagreements. The public saw only the polished version. Behind, it lay the scars of a long and bitter struggle. And while the announcement had been made, the battle inside the palace was only just beginning. The most shocking part of the announcement was not what it said, but what it deliberately left unsaid. Observers immediately noticed the absence of traditional succession language. For centuries, royal declarations had followed strict formulas, temporary arrangements during illness, duties delegated in defined ways, and repeated assurances that the throne itself remained untouched. This time, none of that appeared. Instead, the statement outlined permanent structural reforms, sweeping away centuries of custom with startling boldness. That omission changed everything. Prince William was no longer simply helping his father out of duty or compassion. He was quietly being handed an authority historically reserved for kings, an authority that usually required coronation, yet was now transferred without ceremony. The implications reached far beyond one man's health. This was a deliberate reshaping of how royal power itself would flow. Behind the statement was a strategy months in the making. Palace lawyers had carefully crafted language that appeared ordinary while disguising extraordinary change. The framework was polished until almost unassailable, ensuring that by the time objections might arise, the new order would already be in place. The timing was deliberate as well. International obligations demanded stable leadership. And King Charles, struggling to meet diplomatic commitments, could no longer be the reliable face of the crown. The reforms were as much about preserving the monarchy's global role as they were about his health. In one stroke, multiple problems were resolved. But the personal cost was enormous. Long-nurtured family relationships began to crack under suspicion. Trust, already fragile, started to erode as hidden agendas came to light. Some bonds, it seemed, might never recover. Queen Camilla's feelings remained private, but those close to her described a deep sense of abandonment. To transform from outsider to queen, she now faced the painful realization that her position might be more symbolic than secure. The crown she had fought to earn suddenly felt fragile, even temporary. The announcement also reopened old wounds. In justifying the reforms, references were made to modernizing the monarchy in the spirit of Diana. To many, this invoked the memory of Princess Diana not as history, but as a shield for controversial change. Those words stirred emotions. That extended far beyond politics, reopening grief and scars that had never fully healed. Abroad, reactions were divided. Some leaders praised the royal family for embracing transparency and forward-thinking leadership, while others voiced concerns that Britain's centuries-old institution was entering dangerous, uncharted waters. Commonwealth nations in particular watched closely, aware that their ties to the crown were bound as much by symbolism as by politics. Inside palace walls, uncertainty reigned. Staff members accustomed to decades of tradition now faced a system where established procedures no longer applied. The institutional memory that had carried the monarchy across generations was being disrupted by reforms that advanced faster than many could adapt to. What the public saw as a bold step forward, the palace experienced as an upheaval that left its very foundation shaken. The financial consequences were staggering, forcing entire budgets to be rewritten. Royal estates and properties suddenly required new management structures, while investments had to be reconsidered in light of a future no one could fully predict. Centuries of financial continuity were being uprooted in the name of modernization. At the same time, the absence of Prince Harry from the announcement sparked its own wave of speculation. This was no coincidence. His exclusion appeared deliberate, as though his chapter in royal life had been permanently closed. The rift that began with his departure had now hardened into a complete severing. Royal business moved forward as though his voice, his input, his very presence no longer mattered. Buried deep in the final paragraphs of the document were changes most people overlooked at first glance. New advisory councils were quietly created, while decision-making processes were streamlined to the point of concentrating authority in very few hands. Emergency powers were granted, powers that could be exercised without traditional consultation. In practice, this meant that future crises could be met with swift, decisive action. Yet it also meant that safeguards, the checks and balances, that once prevented abuse of royal authority had been weakened. What was once a system of balance had tilted sharply toward the concentration of power. Although the statement ended with requests for privacy and patience, everyone knew scrutiny would only intensify. Every royal appearance, every decision, every family gesture would now be dissected for evidence of success or failure. The media predictably focused less on the constitutional revolution and more on the human drama. Headlines screamed of betrayal, of family feuds, of quiet tears and whispered anger. The deeper questions of what this meant for democracy, for tradition, for the crown itself were buried under speculation about relationships. Yet constitutional scholars recognized the enormity of what had taken place. The monarchy had reformed itself not through parliament, not through public debate, but by decree. The royal family had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. This was no routine update, nor a temporary adjustment. It was a calculated transformation that concentrated power, eliminated opposition, and rewrote rules that had stood for generations. The delicate balance between tradition and progress had been shattered. In its place now stood something untested, unpredictable, and potentially unstable. The consequences would ripple through every layer of British life and would shape how the monarchy was viewed abroad. Too much power over the king. In return, Camilla, never one to back down, reminded Anne that Charles had chosen her, that their love story was not one of scandal, but of destiny. By the time the dinner ended, it was clear that Camilla's influence in the royal family had suffered a blow. The question now was, who else stood against her? Kate Middleton's silent rebellion was impossible to ignore. For years, Princess Catherine had played the role of the perfect royal, mastering the art of diplomacy with elegance and grace. She had never been one to stir controversy, nor to defy the monarchy's unwritten rules. But sometimes silence speaks louder than words. At the coronation, the world watched as Kate Middleton approached Queen Camilla. The expectation was clear. A deep curtsy, a symbol of respect, hierarchy, and acceptance. But instead, Kate simply nodded. It was a moment so subtle that many missed it. But for those who understood royal etiquette, it was a bombshell. In the monarchy, curtsying is more than just a gesture. It is a declaration of status and allegiance. A deep curtsy to Camilla would have signified Kate's full embrace of her as queen consort. By refusing to bow, Kate sent a message that could not be ignored. Some royal insiders insisted that Kate's decision was not an act of defiance, but rather a step toward modernizing the monarchy. After all, was it not time for the royal family to shed its outdated traditions? Yet others believed it was something far more telling, a quiet show of support for Anne's reservations about Camilla. If that were true, then Buckingham Palace was more divided than it appeared. And still, the weight of Diana's shadow lingered. There is an unspoken truth within the royal family. No matter how much time passes, Princess Diana's presence still looms large. Her tragic story remains woven into the very fabric of the monarchy, a haunting reminder of love lost, betrayal endured, and a princess whose fate was sealed by forces beyond her control. For those who loved her most, the sight of Camilla seated beside King Charles, wearing the very crown that might once have been Diana's, is a wound that will never fully heal. Would things have been different if Diana had become queen consort? Would Prince Harry have remained by his brother's side instead of walking away from royal life? A royal reversal from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, stepping back from senior roles in the royal family, still lingers in memory. Would the fractures within the family ever have existed in the first place? These questions haunt the minds of the British people, whispered by those who still believe Diana was the rightful queen. And perhaps, even within the royal family itself, some wondered the same. The throne now stands at a crossroads. The British monarchy has survived wars, betrayals, and centuries of upheaval. Yet today it faces a crisis from within, one no enemy or external force could ever manufacture. If Princess Anne continues her relentless resistance against Camilla, if Kate Middleton remains subtly distant, and if even King Charles begins to question the unity of his own family, what does this mean for the future of the crown? Camilla's position remains secure, or will the royal family find a way to diminish her role in order to preserve peace? Most importantly, will this divide become the monarchy's undoing? As the doors of Buckingham Palace remain closed to the public, the battles being fought within are left to speculation. Anne will not yield. Camilla will not be dismissed. Kate will not be ignored. The royal shakeup has revealed a future queen's bold stand. For centuries, The British monarchy thrived on a delicate balance of tradition, power, and unwavering formality. Every bow, every curtsy, every rule upheld was part of a grand performance meant to maintain the dignity of the crown. But now, with a new era unfolding, one bold move has ignited a storm of controversy. Princess Kate's subtle yet deliberate refusal to curtsy to Queen Camilla. At first glance, it seemed like a small act, a missed curtsy, a simple nod, nothing that should have sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. But within the rigid walls of royal protocol, such an omission was a statement, one that could redefine the power dynamics within the monarchy. The only question left was whether Kate was merely modernizing royal customs, or whether she was signaling something far more profound. Is this an unspoken declaration of where her true allegiances lie? When it comes to Princess Kate, there is no doubt about her future. Kate Middleton is destined to become the next queen consort once Prince William ascends the throne. She is not merely a royal by marriage. She has become a symbol of stability, grace, and duty, carefully molded into a role that will define the monarchy for the next generation. Yet with such great power comes equally great scrutiny. As a woman who will one day sit beside the king, Kate is expected to set an example for those who follow. She represents continuity, preserving royal traditions, while also embodying a younger, more modern monarchy that must evolve to stay relevant in the 21st century. It is this delicate balancing act that makes her every move significant, and when she chose not to curtsy to Camilla, the world noticed. The curtsy controversy sparked debate. Was it defiance or progress? For centuries, curtsying has been one of the monarchy's unspoken rules, a physical act of submission and respect. A deeper curtsy reflects deep reverence, while a simple nod conveys something far less deferential. So when Kate merely nodded at Queen Camilla instead of performing the traditional curtsy, it sent a powerful signal. She was not bound by the old ways. But why would she make such a move? Could Kate be quietly challenging Camilla's authority? Or was she signaling something far more significant, that the monarchy itself might be ready to shed rigid traditions in favor of a modern approach? Since King Charles took the throne, the royal family has already undergone a quiet but profound transformation. 70 years after his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, Charles III is officially crowned with a mission to bring the monarchy back into line with the modern world. The days when the royal family remained untouched by change are over. Today, adaptation is essential if the monarchy hopes to retain the loyalty of the people. Charles has long championed a streamlined and more efficient institution, one that leaves behind outdated customs in favor of values that feel in sync with contemporary life. In this shift, some traditions, perhaps even curtsying itself, may eventually fade away. Yet modernization cannot come at the expense of the monarchy's core values. The challenge lies in finding the balance between progress and preservation, ensuring the institution remains both respected and relevant. The public's reaction to Kate's decision revealed this tension clearly. Many found her refusal to curtsy refreshing an act of independence, proving that, even within the monarchy, individuals could think for themselves. They viewed her gesture as a modern rebellion, a statement that royals should not be bound by ceremonial gestures alone, but instead valued for their integrity. To them, Kate's choice symbolized progress, a sign that the monarchy is evolving toward a future where authenticity matters more than outdated formalities. But others were outraged. For staunch traditionalists, Kate's omission was nothing less than a scandal. To them, curtsying is not just about showing respect to an individual. It represents centuries of history and structure. They argue that if future royals abandon such traditions, the monarchy itself risks losing its purpose. To these critics, Kate's move was not merely a personal choice. It was a breach of royal decorum that undermined the stability of the institution. Yet the controversy is not simply about a curtsy. At its heart lies something deeper, a growing divide within the royal family. Behind the grandeur of engagements and the polished smiles at public events, tensions continue to simmer inside Buckingham Palace. At the center of this divide is Queen Camilla, a woman whose very place in the monarchy has long been contested. Once vilified as the figure who disrupted Diana's marriage, Camilla has worked for years to gain public acceptance. Slowly, she shifted, from being the most despised woman in Britain to standing as queen consort beside King Charles. Yet for many, she remains an outsider, a woman who took what was never meant to be hers. Princess Anne seems to be one of those critics. If there is one royal who has never wavered in her devotion to duty, it is Anne. Unlike her younger relatives, she has never chased the spotlight nor fallen into the scandals that often shadow the royal family. Instead, she has dedicated her life to preserving the dignity of the monarchy and ensuring that tradition is not discarded in favor of fleeting trends. According to sources close to the palace, Anne does not approve of Camilla. Tensions reportedly came to a head during King Charles's coronation dinner. What should have been a night of celebration instead revealed fractures within the family. Witnesses claimed Anne confronted Camilla directly, questioning her role and her influence over Charles. Camilla, never one to back down, reminded Anne that she had been chosen by Charles himself, that she was not an interloper, but a rightful queen in her own standing. For decades, Camilla has been one of the most controversial figures in British royal history. Loved, hated, misunderstood, and vilified, she has lived under constant scrutiny because of one undeniable truth. Her presence in Charles's life forever reshaped the monarchy. Once considered Britain's most despised woman, she has spent years trying to rebuild her reputation. Yet the shadows of her past linger, haunting every step she takes as she fulfills her role beside the king. Can Camilla ever truly escape the ghost of Princess Diana, or will she always be remembered as the woman who disrupted a royal fairy tale? Her story is one of passion, scandal, and resilience. Long before Diana entered the picture, Camilla and Charles were in love. Their bond was instant, profound, and undeniable. Yet fate and the rigid traditions of the monarchy tore them apart. In 1981, Charles married Lady Diana Spencer, a young, beautiful woman chosen not for love, but for royal duty. The world watched in awe, convinced they were witnessing the perfect fairy tale. But behind the palace walls, the reality was very different. Charles's heart never truly let go of Camilla. Their affair continued in secret, even as Diana struggled to maintain the image of the flawless princess. By 1992, the cracks in the marriage were impossible to hide. The couple separated, and in 1994, Charles admitted on national television that he had been unfaithful. Buckingham Palace released the statement with regret. The Prince and Princess of Wales had decided to part ways. The entire world knew who the other woman was, Camilla Parker Bowles. The revelation shook the monarchy to its core, shattering the fairy tale forever. No one felt the betrayal more deeply than Diana herself. In her infamous 1995 BBC interview with Martin Bashir, she delivered a line that would echo through history. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. With those words, Camilla was cemented in the public eye as the villain, the woman who stole the prince, caused Diana's heartbreak, and destroyed a marriage. When Charles and Diana divorced in 1996, Camilla's public reputation was in ruins. She was despised, mocked, and even pelted with bread rolls by angry citizens in public. Then tragedy struck. In 1997, Princess Diana was killed in a devastating car crash in Paris. The world mourned. And Camilla became the most hated woman in the country, branded as the mistress who had survived where Diana had not. For years after Diana's death, Camilla lived in the shadows. She avoided public life, and when she did appear, faced icy stares, harsh headlines, and endless whispers. Still, Charles never abandoned her. Slowly and carefully, he began reintroducing her into public life. By 2005, the monarchy made a bold and controversial move. Charles and Camilla married. It was an act of defiance. The public wasn't ready, but the monarchy pushed forward regardless. There was, however, a compromise. To respect Diana's memory, Camilla was given the title Duchess of Cornwall instead of Princess of Wales. The palace assured the public that she would never take the title of Queen Consort. Instead, she would be known as Princess Consort when Charles became king. It was a careful balancing act, acknowledging Diana's enduring place in the nation's heart. But the promise would not last. In 2022, following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Charles ascended the throne. To the shock of many, it was announced that Camilla would indeed be crowned queen consort. The decision divided the nation. For Diana's supporters, it felt like a betrayal of her legacy. For others, it was simply the inevitable conclusion of history. After decades of scandal, mockery, and hostility, Camilla was now Charles's official partner on the throne. Over time, she'd worked diligently to repair her public image, championing charities, advocating for survivors of domestic abuse, and stepping into the role of a supportive royal. Yet, even with these efforts, her reign as queen consort remains divisive. To some, she is a hardworking, loyal partner who has proven her dedication. To others, she is still the symbol of betrayal, a woman forever living in Diana's shadow. Public opinion remains split. Even in modern portrayals such as The Crown, Camilla is often shown as manipulative, tied forever to the scandal that rocked the monarchy. No matter what she does, the past clings to her. Within the royal family itself, not all have embraced her. Princess Anne has remained openly distant, believing Charles's first marriage should have worked. And Prince Harry, in his memoir Spare, described her as calculating, suggesting she improved her image at the expense of others. But does Camilla care about the criticism? Her long history has shown anything. It is her iron will and refusal to back down, her journey from the other. Woman to Queen Consort is one of the most controversial chapters in royal history. The question remains, has she finally earned her place, or will she forever be remembered as Diana's shadow? What are your thoughts? Do you believe Princess Anne's attitude was justified? Share your views in the comments.